Hello and welcome to episode number 150 of Week in Review. My name is Sean, and on this week's show, we're going to talk about Pixar's Soul. We're going to talk about the new Dontnod game, Twin Mirror, which is a title for some reason I keep forgetting. We'll also look forward to this week's new releases and the streams happening over on twitch.tv/Shaunosaurus First up on this week's show, we have a movie. That's right, a movie is being talked about and reviewed on this show for the first time in like 9 months. I don't remember. I was thinking about it today. I don't remember the last time I actually talked about a movie on this show, and I think it might have been Extraordinary, which would have been at the end of March, maybe. I may have... Oh, maybe it was Scoob. Was it Scoob in like May? I just remember that I talked about that movie. I think there may have been one more. It doesn't matter. The point is, it's been a very long time since I've talked about a movie on this show, and that movie is Pixar's Soul. A movie that I actually didn't think I would watch as soon as I did. I was planning on just waiting for it to come out on Blu-ray, catch it that way. It's not in theaters, so I wasn't terribly concerned with it, and I didn't really want to deal with the Disney Plus sort of thing. But being, home for the holidays has allowed me to check out the movie because someone in my family got the access to the premiere, whatever it was, and so I got to watch it. It played through twice on Christmas. One time I wasn't really paying attention. I was kind of intentionally not paying attention because I didn't want to see anything. And then the second time when it played later, when it was quieter, I was very locked in and focused on it. I like Soul. I think it's a good movie. I don't think it's one of Pixar's best. I think that this is one of the movies that Pixar makes that just doesn't stick with me the way that some of their other stuff has, specifically like an Up, a Monsters, Inc., a Toy Story 3, stuff like that. But it definitely is a really good movie. It feels like a movie like a Monsters University, one that I look at and I go, hey, I really enjoy that movie, but it isn't necessarily my first pick. But I also wouldn't complain that it's on. I don't think Pixar has missed, and I include all of the Cars movies in that. I think actually Cars 2 is the best of the three Cars movies. I don't think Pixar's ever missed, and I think that streak continues with Soul. Soul tells the story of a man named Joe Gardner who is about to get a life-changing opportunity when he falls down a manhole, and that kicks off everything that happens in the rest of the movie because he technically is dead. It's a very interesting premise. I've been very excited about this movie for a long time. Back when I talked about Onward, that's the movie that came out in March from Pixar, I had noted that the previous years in which Pixar has released two movies in the same year, one of them hasn't been that great, but the other one has been one of the best movies that they have ever made, between Coco and Inside Out back in 2015. So when I walked out of Onward thinking like, okay, this movie's okay, but I don't really like it. But if we look at the history, we have a pretty good track record of something amazing is coming down the pipe. I got even more excited for Soul. I was already excited for it. I like the concept of it. I love what Pixar does anyway. And I just was so hyped because I thought, man, we're going to get something special later this year. When in reality, what we get from Soul is a movie that is good, but not great. I think my favorite part of Soul is actually the musical sequences. I really loved the way they were scored, the way they sounded. They were awesome to just listen to. The way they're animated and the way they're shot is just, it's beautiful and it is a joy to watch. I really wish, mainly because I love movie theaters, but these sequences specifically really made me wish I was able to see this movie in a theater, in a Dolby screening, in a Dolby setting with that like super surround sound that they have and the way that they make the theater even darker and the images even better. Those would have been absolutely magnificent sequences to watch in a theater. And I sincerely hope that when all this stuff blows over and we can go back to theaters regularly, that Soul is a movie that is playing in theaters, because I think it deserves the theater experience for these sequences specifically. But even beyond that, the visual style and the animation is just so incredible in this movie. And aside from the musical sequences, what I also really liked about this movie is how well Pixar does interpretations of things that we don't know. So the basic plot is that, like I said, Joe Gardner is about to have a life-changing performance when he falls down a manhole and he turns into his soul. He lands on this platform that's going towards this great white light, and I love the way they interpret this stuff that is clear and visually very interesting. They go and do all kinds of different things with the souls. There's an area before you become a human, like before you become a baby, how that process takes place. There's what happens kind of after you die and being like a mentor and trying to do all this stuff. I think it's fascinating to watch this stuff visually, but I do think that this stuff would have been more impactful if something like Inside Out hadn't already existed. Inside Out kind of set the bar for that, like, how does this thing that we don't know what it looks like, how do we interpret that in a clear way that is effective and emotionally engaging? They've already hit that note, and there were times where I was watching this where I'm like, this is cool. This looks great. I love the way this is working, but I also have seen Inside Out, so it doesn't feel quite as fresh as it may have if that movie did not exist. This is a fantastically paced, super brisk, like, hour and 40 minutes, get in, get out. Like, watching this movie and watching it 1.5-ish times where it's kind of just on in the background, I didn't realize the first time, like, the movie was over and I was like, oh, okay, cool, whatever. The second time, I didn't realize just how quickly that movie moves. It just goes. It's like Pixar has it down to a science for their pacing and the way that they want things to go. It moves from point to point to point, quickly, efficiently, engagingly, interestingly. There's good gags in there. It's funny throughout. It has beautiful moments of like the tear-jerkedness. There's one sequence specifically towards the end where I knew, even when I wasn't watching, I was like, kind of had my eyes on the screen and I was like, this movie's gonna get me. And it did. And I was like, oh, God dang it. Because they just know how to effectively convey these emotions, and they know how to let that stuff kind of breathe, which is weird because the sequence that immediately follows the big, like, musical montage that has, like, these flashing moments from Joe's past and how effective that is so jarringly put next to the next, like, action sequence. Action in this movie is a very, like a very curved term. There's nothing that's terribly actiony about this movie, but it is the more, like, intense movement part, if that makes sense, where there is a goal to be achieved and a character could cause, like, physical harm. And I liked the way that portion ended, but I do think that there's a part where the musical piece, like, swells to, like, this emotional high, and then immediately kicks into this other musical piece, and it's just the way it's cut is super jarring. I think if they had let the first moment, the emotional moment, kind of rest and pause, and then come back with a, like, more upbeat piece of music to more evenly transition between these two parts. I think people know what I'm talking about when they watch the movie. I'm trying to stay away from spoilers as much as possible, but because it just came out. But I think if you change the musical style a little bit, I think you can flatten that out so it's not, like, way down here and then all the way up here, and you're like, oh God, this is jarring and weird, and I wasn't expecting that. And it just feels a little off. Like, it feels like you're like you've lost your footing, and you're like, okay, where are we in the, like, what mood am I supposed to be in for the rest of this? That might be, like, just a Super Sean thing as far as, like, that herky-jerkiness of it, but it was something that definitely, like, stood out to me as, like, oh, this is just a little bit weird. I also think that this movie could have used a little bit more of an ending to it. I understand that there's a lot of, like, visual cues early in the movie to explain what the final line of the film means, but at the same time, I think that with this movie being aimed towards kids and towards families, I think taking the final thing that Joe says and showing how he puts that into action to improve what he is doing, I think that would be super helpful to explain that. Like, how does he take the final thing he says and make it work to follow through on that? I just find the final line that he says to be a little bit vague, and I think that an extra couple of minutes to really push through that point would have helped kind of put a nicer final bow on it. Like, it's a nice enough sentiment, but seeing the action would have been helpful to me personally. These are, I mean, granted, they're pretty minor, like things that I just didn't gel with. Like the jarring transition between the emotional point and the more actiony point feels like a pretty Sean like sort of thing that I don't think is going to bother a lot of people. It was just something that stuck out to me, and I think most people will be totally fine with the ending. I think a lot of people will really like this movie. It's like I was saying, a super brisk hour and 40 minutes. It's visually funny. It has good dialogue. I think the characters are interesting, and I think it works really well. It is gorgeously animated. The musical sequences are fantastic. I really enjoy this movie, and it reminds me of like why I like movies so much and why I enjoy the theater experience so much is because when the theater lights go down, no one can see you cry, which is always helpful. So I think if you are interested in Soul or Pixar movies at all, or even like Disney stuff, I think this is pretty obviously worth a watch. But if you don't want to deal with the Disney Plus thing, when it comes out on Blu-ray, absolutely check it out there. Get like the 4K nicest disc you can find. Because this movie is incredible visually and has a fantastic soundtrack. I really enjoyed Soul. Pixar remains unblemished for me. Next up on this week's show, the little more familiar item of the last 9 or so months, a video game that we'll be talking about. This week's game is Twin Mirror, and this is the new Dontnod game. Dontnod has given us a selection of games so far. One of them I really liked in Tell Me Why. Another one I'm okay with. I think it's uneven, but overall good. I like the first Life is Strange. And if you tuned into this show about this time last year, you would know that I don't like their other game, Life is Strange 2, because I just didn't think it was very good. So they're back with a new game called Tell Me Why. And I was excited, but cautiously excited, where I was like, okay, I could really like this, but it could also fall flat on its face. And I'm pleased to report that I do actually quite enjoy this game. Twin Mirror isn't necessarily Game of the Year material, but I did enjoy my time with it over the 7 or so hours I spent playing the game and experiencing the story. Twin Mirror tells the story of a character named Sam, who you play as, and Sam has to return to the town that he ran away from 2 years ago to go to his best friend's funeral. His best friend has died. Mysterious circumstances seem kind of mysterious about it, but it also seems like maybe the person who's pushing you to look deeper might be looking for answers that aren't actually there. The reason you left town is because you wrote an article about the safety conditions inside of the mine that is located in this town, and the article caused such a stir that the mine was shut down and the town was subsequently pretty much killed. People are still there, but the town is not doing well, and people are pissed because Sam wrote that article that took away so many people's livelihoods. Throughout my playthrough of this game, which again took about 7 hours, I found myself very thoroughly engaged and interested in what was happening in the main story / mystery, and kind of peeling back those layers to try and figure out exactly what's going on. I had a good time with it. I really enjoyed the detective. Oh god, they have a special name for it, but they have this kind of detective mode where you take clues and you put pieces together so that you can figure out what exactly happened. The first example of this is when you go back to a bar after you wake up and you're like, why is my shirt covered in blood? That's not good. You go back to the bar to kind of piece together what happens, and you look around for all these clues, and then you go into, it's called the Mind Palace. You go into the Mind Palace, which is this thing that he can do. Is kind of like a weird, it's like a thinking space, whatever. And you put these pieces together and you try to follow the logical answer to give you the correct answer. And I really enjoyed putting that stuff together, thinking it through and saying okay, so if it started in this point, if something would have happened, he probably would have been pulled backwards, which means he would have landed in this table behind him. And then where does the fight go from here? If it needs to end here for this, and maybe this isn't what it seems like. There's enough, there are enough clues to, for you to diverge in path and go okay, well maybe it ended here because this thing happened prior in the night. And I found it so engaging and interesting to put that stuff together and come up with a solution that I thought was correct, and often was. I thought it was intuitive and interesting, and I thought that the way that it was done was just really, really neat. I also really enjoyed the collectibles. There are two types of collectibles. There's memoirs, that are things you can find in the world that are your traditional collectible, like you look around, you find it, and then what I thought was so neat about it was that the memoirs that you find are connected directly to a person, and it gives you a little bit of backstory to kind of build out the world and the relationships and how people interact with each other, or more specifically how people interact with Sam, because that's the character you play as. But I thought those were really interesting. There are also some other collectibles called memories that give you little cut scenes that again flesh out the world, and I thought those were interesting as well. Also, shout out to Dontnod, because they have a really cool mode in it called collectible mode, where you can go back and you can only get the memoirs, but when you go into this mode, all the decisions you make don't matter. It's like a separate thing. It doesn't save any of it over your normal playthrough, and I think it's just a really cool thing that I wish more developers would add into it. It's just like, here's this collectible mode. We know what you're here for. You're trying to get collectibles for either story purposes, or in my case more of an achievement purpose, or both of them, because I enjoyed them. Unfortunately, the memories, you have to go through a whole other playthrough, or in my case you would have to start from a specific point and then play the rest of the game to get the memories. So that's a weird decision, but I think that the collectibles are cool, and I like the way they fleshed out the world, and I love that there is a collectible mode in the game that Dontnod has done. And they've done this before. This isn't like a new thing. They've had this, I think they've had this all the way back as far as Life is Strange 1, but it's a very cool feature. Please keep doing it. It's awesome. With all that positivity being said, there is some weirdness with this game. The first weirdness is there are a couple of gameplay elements that are introduced early in the game that are completely absent in the second act of the game, and then reappear at the end. And I think that's super weird, because it's jarring in a way that's interesting, of what the hell is happening, and why is this happening, and what's going on. I want to find out more and continue playing this game. But then they just abandon that, and then it shows back up, and I'm like, what the hell is happening? It's also at the point at the end of the game when these things reappear that I don't think everything is explained super clearly, as far as the more brain bendy aspects of it. There's kind of two tracks to this game, where there's the personal story with Sam and what he's going through, but there's also the mystery aspect. I was more engaged and interested with the mystery aspect and trying to solve what was going on than I was the more brain bendy Sam stuff. And I think that's the stuff that doesn't get explained super well. I think the mystery stuff is explained well enough, and I think that my other knock against this game is that when the whole picture becomes clear, it's not as shocking as people probably think it is, because we've seen this a lot. And when it gets to a certain point, you go oh yeah, okay. And then, okay, yeah, this all checks out. I also think that it tips its hand a little bit too early, but I think that it's so difficult to nail putting an idea in your head and not giving away the whole kind of thing. It's such a difficult balance to strike, where you have to bring attention to this specific act, because if you don't, then players might feel cheated or blindsided, where they're oh, I didn't even see that. That feels cheap. But if you skew too far the other way, which is what I think they did in this case, where they make it too obvious, you go oh, I'm just kind of waiting for this to show up and for the character to figure this out, even though I'm pretty sure I know what's going on throughout it. But that's a smaller, maybe more Shawnean nitpick that I don't know how many people are going to be super upset with. Overall, though, I really enjoyed my 7-hour playthrough of this game. I played it all in one day. The VODs are up here on Twitch if you'd like to watch me play that game, and see what kind of decisions I made and how I ended the game. This is the kind of stuff that I really like. I talked about it with the Man of Medan, the Dark Pictures anthology, Man of Medan being one of them, and the other Little Hope. I love these smaller games. I love these 4 to 6 hour, in this case 7 hour experiences, where you can play it in an afternoon. It's one stream, it's one afternoon, it's one weekend, and you can move on. That's the kind of stuff that I want. If you're looking at Dontnod, if you're looking at this review This is what I like. I like that Tell Me Why is 3 episodes. It's like maybe 9 hours. I love that this is all one game, which is something I forgot to mention. You get to play this from start to finish. There's no episodic situation with this. It's all in the package immediately. I love that it's 6 hours, 7 hours. I think that that's fantastic. I want to see more of this. I know a lot of people sit there and are like, I love these 55, 65, 75 hour experiences. That's not for me. I love the smaller stuff where I can get in, get out, and understand what's going on, and get out in a timely fashion. I want to see more of this from developers like Dontnod and from, I believe it's Supermassive Games. This stuff is awesome. I love the low price barrier to entry, and I think that the length is perfectly fine with what it's offering. I think Twin Mirror is worth checking out. I don't think it's going to be everybody's cup of tea. I don't think everyone's going to like it as much as I did, but I'm really glad that I gave it a chance, and I'm glad that I enjoyed it so much. I was thoroughly engaged with the main mystery. I liked the characters and the relationships and the interactions. I like this style of narrative adventure with dialogue options and missable and choice-based stuff. That stuff clicks really well with me, and I just thought it worked very well in this particular game. I loved the detective stuff. I think that was my favorite stuff in the game. I think that the Mind Palace stuff is interesting, even if it's maybe not the most well explained. I think it's cool, and it's an interesting concept. I had a good time playing this game, and I would recommend maybe watching a little bit of a playthrough or a trailer and seeing if you're interested in it. And it's a $30 7-hour experience, and it's hard to go wrong with that sort of thing. I enjoyed my time with Twin Mirror quite a bit. Finally, on this week's show, we'll take a look at the week's new releases. There's nothing. We are between Christmas and New Year's. Nobody's putting out anything. I think there were 2 games coming out on Xbox this week, so it is slim pickings. Your best to just keep working on that backlog and whittling that down as best you can, which is what I will be doing, checking out that backlog with the streams happening over on twitch.tv/ShaunosaurusRex. First, I'm going to be streaming on Wednesday, which is not a day that I normally stream, but I did that last week, so it's kind of a day that I sometimes stream-ish. Anyway, the point is I'll be streaming on Wednesday. Wednesday is my birthday, and I'm going to be doing a big, long stream to celebrate that. I did it last year. I had a blast doing it, and I wanted to bring it back and do a long stream of a bunch of different things this year as well. So the plan is to get the Bug Snacks Platinum on PlayStation 4, because I'm almost there, and that should take a couple hours. After that, we're going to be bringing back Grab Bag for Season 3. We have a whole new set of games. They'll be all wrapped. We'll do a couple episodes of that. Then we'll be throwing a party on my Animal Crossing island. That'll be probably an hour or so. And then we will end it with a big drunken finale of some kind. It might be Fall Guys. I have an MLB Slugfest game over here that I picked up to try. Maybe it could be Halo. I don't really know. I just know that it'll get sloppy and it'll get messy. If you go back and watch the Napoleon Drunkamite videos that I made last year, something like that. I have some special drinks for it as well. I'm very excited about it. Friday, I'll be back because Thursday's not going to happen if it goes the way I think it's going to go. But Friday, I'll be back to finish up Yes Tomorrow. And then depending on how long that takes, we're either going to play Calico and Fogs, or we'll just play one or the other, and then the other one will just be on a different day. Sunday, we'll be continuing our quest for the final 75 gamer score in Bus Simulator. We are finally in the DLC. I'm guessing there will be about 2 more weeks of that, and then we'll be moving on to something else. And then Monday will be Mystery Bag Monday, episode number 12. Head on over to twitter.com/ShaunosaurusRex to cast your vote there, or follow me over on Instagram, and you can vote there as well when I post the picture Sunday afternoon or evening, depending on when I remember that I need to post that picture. Thank you so much for watching this week's episode of Week in Review. If you like the content, you can scroll on down and hit that subscribe button, and then ring that bell so you know when I post brand new videos every single day of the week, sometimes even twice in a single day. It's exciting. You could scroll on down a little bit lower if you'd like to leave me a comment down below if you want to tell me more about Pixar's Soul, what you thought of it, or you can tell me about Dontnod's Twin Mirror. Be sure to head on over to twitch.tv/Shawnosaurus and check out the streams on Wednesday, Friday, Sunday, and Monday. And as always, check back right here every week for more Week in Review. And we'll see you next week.